My name is Mitchell Powell, and in today's episode, we're performing a demo of the Forcepoint DLP Endpoint. On the agenda today, we are going to look at the various policy controls within the console, how the endpoint operates, and how reports can be configured. So let's get started. In order for us to audit and block data, we first need to define some policies. Taking a look at our predefined library, we can focus on policies that cover specific industries as well as regions. For an example, I'm going to select the finance and banking industry as well as healthcare and pharma. As for my region selection, I'm just going to leave it on the default, which is the US. From the list generated, we can delve into general policies focusing on PII, PHI, and financial rule sets. In addition to that, we can also focus on regulatory and compliance rules, and these are going to be based on our industry selections. So for an example, because we chose healthcare and pharma, we now have HIPAA as one of our rule sets. Every single predefined rule that we are looking at inside of here is utilizing primarily a combination of validation and proximity checking, looking for content that would be used for an exfiltration scenario. Although the solution comes with nearly 1,500 pre-built rules, sometimes we need to have a rule set that's a little bit more specific. In this case, we can either modify some of these pre-existing rule sets, or we can also build a custom rule focusing on specific information or specific data sets. For an example, let's take a look at a custom rule set focusing on healthcare information. Custom rules, as well as modifying predefined policy rules, we can identify what kind of content is going to be sensitive to that policy condition. Rules can be configured to identify different combinations utilizing what we call as data classifiers. These data classifiers are the means of how we can identify data or content leaving the machine. For example, we can either use patterns and phrases. This is going to be a combination of utilizing keywords and dictionaries and regular expressions, as well as Forcepoint proprietary scripts to identify content. You can also utilize file labeling tags as well, such as tags from a solution like Bolden James or Titus or Microsoft Information Protection. We can also utilize our rule sets to focus on certain file types, such as PDFs and Word documents. But we can also utilize methods such as fingerprinting and machine learning to address more specific information as well. Once we identify what data we are building our policy around, then we can focus on defining what action occurs whenever there is a policy violation. With a DLP endpoint, we can enforce audit and blocking controls as well as a confirmation action for the 6 supported channels on the endpoint. The supported channels are email applications, clipboard and file access functions through the application control, removal media, looking at activity over HTTP and HTTPS, data going over to LAN, as well as data being sent to a printer. Along with defining actions, we can also configure options around remediation and notification, such as generating email alerts for whenever there's a policy violation. Taking a look at the client side, we can see the endpoint residing in the system tray below. If we expand it, we can see the endpoint is connected to the server, so we can report back on any policy violation that may occur, as well as retrieve any new updates for any policy changes. We can also configure the endpoint to perform a data discovery scan on local drives. To go through a few examples, let's see what happens when we're performing an audit action on a file upload that contains a credit card number. To go through a few examples, let's see what happens when we're performing an audit action on a file upload that just contains credit card numbers. So if I take a file here and I'm going to upload it to dlptest.com, Say submit. Since we're auditing, there's no on-screen prompts or notifications. But let's say our user decides to send an email that contains not only a credit card number, but also a social security number. Well, let's say our user decides to send an email that contains not only a credit card number, but also a social security card number. So I'm going to send an email to myself. I'm also going to take that social and credit card number as part of the test here. So we have our social security card number, as well as our credit card number. And if I say send, we get prompted with a confirmation action. We'll go ahead and say this is required for business, and then put a justification. And if we say allow, then the endpoint allows us to send out and deliver this message to our targeted recipient. If we decide to say block or close out the prompt, the endpoint will block us. For our last test, let's try sending a sensitive records file to a USB. For example, I'm going to pull up the flash drive, and I'm going to send over a CSV file that contains some financial information. If I drag and drop it over to the flash drive, the endpoint blocks us because this file is too sensitive based on our policy. Now let's go back to the management console and see what kinds of reports can be generated. Now that we're back inside the management console, we can take a look at reporting. For reporting, there's a lot of predefined reports that can be generated, with some of these being high-level reports for executives and management, as well as some low-level reports for admins and case management. Diving into a DLP dashboard report, we can see details on the environment, such as a number of incidents by severity or by action. What are the top policy violations or top sources of violations? And if we need to drill down into any of the items, we can by clicking on the hyperlink text here. Okay, let's go back and let's explore an incident report. So if I go back to the catalog, I'm going to click on an incident report for the last 3 days. And from here, we can see all the different transactions that were made within the environment, especially the ones we just generated on our test client. So for an example, we can see a violation of that file we sent over to the flash drive. So we have our user who sent the file over to this PNY USB, as well as the file that was transmitted. In this case, we saw a number of credit card numbers, in this case 8 numbers in total, as well as data from our fingerprinting of a database. For some of the other transactions, we can also dive into our upload, in which case we sent a credit card number to dlptest.com, as well as the email that was generated, where we sent the email to my Gmail address, which involved both a credit card number and a social, but we also had that confirmation prompt, and we see that as the listed action here as well. This concludes our demo of Forcepoint DLP Endpoint. If you have any questions on any of the items that were covered today, please leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this content and would like to see more, please like and subscribe. Thank you.